Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first JS-focused Tech Hub talk. Thank you very much for you all attending. While we wait for people to join, just a quick bit of housekeeping to get through. We will be recording this session, so if anyone's not happy with that, then feel free to drop off or stay off camera. And secondly, at the end of the talk, we will have a live Q&A. So if you can hold your questions there till the end, then feel free to come off mute and shout them out. Or raise your hand or pop it into the chat at the end of the talk, and we'll have enough time for Q&A then, rather than kind of disrupting this talk as we go through. But without further ado, and most importantly, welcome to Carl and Redian from Beautify. I'm excited to have you both with us this afternoon. Carl's Beautify CATO and Redian is their tech lead, and they've been busy disrupting the beauty space, so super keen to hear a bit more around JavaScript technologies, frameworks, and what it's all about. That's enough from me. I'll hand over to Carl for an introduction. Thanks very much.
A bit more about Beautify first then. So yeah, it's a 5-year-old business. We've got a footprint in the UK and the US. It's actually a membership-based business, which is slightly different, as in if you want to have access to products that are significantly less than the market, maybe 70 or 80% less, you pay a subscription, but a membership subscription, so maybe £5 or £10 a month. And in doing so, you have access to products at a significantly lower price. So the nature of our business is a membership-based business, but for products that are largely habitual in nature, you use them again and again. We're a pure e-commerce play, so we don't have any physical presence. And we build and design we design and manufacture using labs and suppliers all around the world, all the product range that we sell to consumers. So we never resell another brand. It's all Beautify branded, Beautify designed, and Beautify manufactured with all our partners around the world. There's about 130 people in Beautify, growing really quickly. Actually, when I joined 12 months ago, I think there was Redian just shy of 60 or 70. So we've grown incredibly quickly. A lot of part of that is digital. Again, we didn't have a product engineering team when I joined last September. That was all onshored with an agency in the UK. And we built all that in-house now. We're doing lots of innovation to really accelerate this business with some really interesting technology innovation, which we'll talk about some of it today. We're largely mobile first. 70% of all our customers shop on mobile. And we are really in a quite unique position, actually, because given like the likes of Amazon and all the other ones who have a digital relationship with the consumer through an e-commerce play, what they try to do is create a personalized experience with a consumer. But they find it incredibly difficult because I use Amazon a lot, and my purchase behavior is really wide. And so they simply can't create a personalized experience because my purchase behavior is so wide. But within cosmetics and beauty, it's a very narrow kind of field. And it's actually very habitual in what people do. They buy again and again and again. That's the nature of cosmetics. And with a membership model as well, they encourage to come back and repurchase for some really good products. In a luxury sector, it allows us to learn a lot more about a consumer and use that data in a good way to be able to personalize the relationship with the consumer. So all these things put it in a very interesting position in the sector, which is ripe for disruption, able to do some pretty unique innovation, personalization for a consumer. And there's loads of stuff that we've been doing to really accelerate that within Beautify. So that's a little bit of Beautify. Really, we're talking about technology today, not about the business. And technology is really driven by, well, there's so much choice today in technology of like when you're starting, and we were starting again, we were using an e-commerce kind of off-the-shelf platform, which wasn't really fit for purpose for this business. As we start to grow and scale, things were slow and hard. We wanted to be able to move a lot faster and do some really interesting innovation. But when we started this last September, we were overwhelmed with choice in terms of how we build it, whether we use responsive, adaptive, or progressive designs, all the other things around organic search, single pages. So many different decisions that we could and should have made through innovation at the start, which really will inform how we're going to build our technology. And making the wrong or right decisions at the start could have been really expensive. So we spent quite a bit of time understanding like all these choices out there, and often a lot of this is actually misunderstood or misused, and these could be quite expensive mistakes. So for example, there's a common industry kind of correlation between the speed of your site and the acquisition of customers, like purchase behavior. And so a 1 second reduction in site speed typically means, and again, this is just industry standard data, around 10% fewer page views, 16% reduction in customer satisfaction, and 7% reduction in acquisition. So a huge impact on a business who's trying to sell by just 1 second reduction in page speed. So that's just one consideration as we're choosing our technology, as to speed being a really, really important attribution for a site that we're building, because without that, we won't be able to grow as a business, and speed, like many sites, is really key. But it's a lot more than that. It's really driven by what the business we're looking to achieve. We've grown very quickly, but like, what were our goals as we continue to grow at scale in lots of other markets beyond just the UK and the US? Here's a few examples, not exclusive, sorry. So obviously mobile first. We're a mobile first business, as most e-commerces are these days. Again, 70% of our business comes through mobile. Multi-device, again, you can never predict who's coming from which device, where they are in the world, whether it's a small device, a large device, a tablet, 42-inch screen you can shop on these days. So how do we know, and how do we create the best user experience on the device they're on? Obviously, lightning speed, highly discoverable. We always want to rank highly in the Googlebot's kind of search criteria. How do we do that? Obviously, zero friction when we're trying to acquire new customers. Customers just want to get online, shop, and check out. And so the more friction you put in that process, the more you're going to lose your customer base. And that's what we've seen as we've grown. This is an interesting one. This is really a kind of a reflection of the mobile experience, as in shop anywhere, as in shop where you've got an inconsistent connection to the server on a mobile. And so a lot of the later technologies allows it to people to even shop offline, which is the next one. I can shop anywhere, even offline on a bus with no mobile connection. I can still continue to shop. And some of the later technologies allow us to do that, which is really interesting. And obviously internationalization. I'm sure there's a bunch more in there, but those are kind of the core drivers for our technology decisions. Beyond the non-functional one, obviously highly available, safe and secure. We want to choose a technology that's got a large resource pool. Talent is a big part of our success. We've grown very quickly, and so choosing technology is a big part of that. And then rapid incremental delivery. How could we continue to iterate and do things really quickly? And we've shown that through the technology we've chosen. So again, this is a reflection of all our decisions have been based on business needs. Obviously, decisions based on technology needs are really important, but aligning that with our business goals is equally important. So let's move on to some of the decisions. So the first one, I guess, was, well, how do we build a site? Like, what kind of experience do we want to build? And here's two kind of competing decisions. We could either gone with kind of the Amazon, they use adaptive design, which is basically choosing the device you're on and having a specific mobile site for that device. Through to more like what Starbucks have done with a responsive site, as in, the assets are pretty consistent and the site will morph around trying to serve based on the device you're on. So there's actually only one website compared to many websites on Amazon. We went with obviously responsive. Why? At a young business trying to scale, having many different versions of all the different websites, from a small mobile through to a tablet, through to a desktop, through to a large 42-inch TV maybe, means we have to then basically do things 3 or 4 or 5 times for a consumer experience. That puts a huge amount of load both on the technology we use, but also the design considerations. And design and UX is a huge part of, as we're building the site, around friction. We just didn't have the capacity to do that as we're growing as business, and I'm not sure we'd ever want to do that, because consistency on user experience as a consumer, and consumers do switch between their device, their desktop, it's actually quite a lot. So we chose a responsive. There's one site and it will morph around to suit the needs of the device it's been rendered on. And so there's only one experience we have to build, and it's really how do we make best use of the page with the existing assets we have. So that's how we're building the site, largely through UX and design. We spend a lot of time, this is probably the hardest decision we made, actually, is to, should we build an app or should we build a website? Apps are really, really common for shopping. Like you look at ASOS and all the other ones out there for e-commerce plays, they've all got an app. And it's like, well, why have we not got an app? And actually, we went with a progressive web app. Well, what is progressive web? Well, it's actually a reasonably new technology. It's been around for 4 or 5 years. Google are kind of driving it. But a lot of e-commerce businesses, or even commerce businesses, so Starbucks, I know Asda have using it, and others have started to use progressive. And what progressive is trying to simulate a mobile experience, but without having to find an app store, download it, find space on your phone, and all that friction. There's a lot of friction around app development and app shopping, whereas fundamentally a customer only wants to go on a website, buy something and check out and go, and all that other friction for us as a young business as we're trying to grow, we felt was far too much. What progressive web does is allows us to use a lot of the features as an app development, access to all the hardware on the phone on the whole, even do push notifications and things like that on a website. So we could use a lot of the features, but without having all the friction. And so we, in the first instance, went with a progressive experience. I think I read a quote at the time around Starbucks had done a similar thing. They've moved away from app development, although they still have an app, to progressive web, and they saw acquisition increase by 8%. So people were allowed to shop offline with progressive. It allows really, really powerful features. That again, Starbucks saw a big increase in acquisition purely by removing friction and allowing accessibility for consumers of how they go into the office, maybe on the tube or offline, and they can still continue to shop. And then when they're next online, then it'll place the order. So again, it's really, really interesting technology that we're using. And then the final one before I hand over to Redian is, so we understand how we're going to present the pages through responsive design. We kind of knew what kind of underlying principles around progressive web we were building. But really one thing we looked at for some time as well is like, how do we want to build the pages itself? And there's kind of 3 main choices, and there's some nuances around this. Either client-side rendering, which is where you go to a server, the server sends most of the data and it builds the page on the client, on the mobile device. Conversely, server-side rendering, where the page is built on the server, and then static site generation, which is where the page is pre-built on the server. And those are the kind of the main technologies, the nuances around that. And on the whole, we went with server-side generation. Why? Because one, it's lightning fast, because the pages are already pre-built on the server and distributed through the CDN network. And so when a consumer is going to a page which has got largely static content, it's milliseconds to pull down the page and load it on the device, compared to sometimes seconds on other types of technologies. And again, the correlation between the speed of experience and the acquisition of a customer is really strong. So we're looking for a lightning speed. And again, static site generation allows us to get a really high speed. It also allows us to be highly accessible by the bots. And so by creating all our static sites and generating them and store them, then they're highly accessible and they're much more likely to get ranked by the Google search engines and things like that. Again, a lot easier to do that than client-side rendering. It makes it a hell of a lot harder to achieve the same level of ranking. Possible, but again, it's a lot harder. And so these were some of the reasons why we chose this technology, to allow us to be really fast and highly accessible. I guess final slide before I hand over to Redian. I thought it'd be worthwhile just using, I guess, some of the core web vitals. This is just Lighthouse, which is kind of the one way which Google tried to measure your site performance. But this is kind of the outcome of all our technology choices compared to one of the leading e-commerce global sites. I won't say which one of those, but it's one of the global best sites out there. And this is just a direct correlation between me running Lighthouse score on one of their product listing pages compared to an equivalent one based on what we've done. And you can see it's significantly better, largely again based on performance, because we've chosen technologies to allow our site to be hugely performant. Why is this important? Well, this is going to have a direct correlation again on the customer shopping experience, but also how Google rank. It will always rank this site, irrespective of whether it's Beauty Pie or not, because it perceives this site to be a lot better for a consumer, because it's faster, it's more accessible, it's got better best practices, and it's a lot better for organic search. And so when you search for a term, it will rank this site before this site. And that's why this is such an important choice in technology, because this is free marketing. If somebody searches for a cosmetic product and we see Beauty Pie at the top, we don't pay a penny for that compared to all the other marketing channels. And this is why this is such an important part of growing as a business, is free marketing. Cool. So that's the business context and some of the overarching technology choices. I'm going to hand over to Reddy now, who's going to walk through some of the specifics around why we chose Next.js and Chakra, which is really the meat and bones of this. So, Reddy, and let me hand over to you.
Thank you, Carl. Yeah, so in everything that Carl explained, in the early days, we were faced with lots of choices and dilemmas on what tools and platforms, architectures to build this new platform in. One of the sort of frameworks that was available to us at that time was Next.js. None of us had commercial experience with Next.js before, but we had heard of it. So we did some due diligence, we did some proofs of concepts, and it was quite a nice experience. So we start with the developer experience, so getting something up and running relatively quickly, and seeing the developer experience as well as the performance of the application was something that sort of convinced us that Next.js was a tool worth investing on. Internationalization, internationalized routing comes via the IAPN plugin in Next.js, which is quite nice. Server-side rendering. So, in different to Gatsby, Next.js is considered a bit of a hybrid framework where it can offer you different types of rendering, so server-side rendering, server-side generation, and lately the incremental static regeneration, which is quite nice for performance as well as SEO ranking, where different crawlers, when crawling your site, will get a very clear picture of what your page looks like. Smart bundling and automatic code splitting. This is to do with the way how the build process of the application decides on what is the bare minimum of what's necessary for a page to be statically generated or rendered on your screen. So this way it can reduce quite a lot, considerably, the bundle size. And as many of us know, the payload is very important when it comes to rendering stuff on screen, especially on mobile devices. We're on limited network, limited capacity devices like memory and processing power, etc. So the less you send to the browser, the better in terms of rendering speed and performance. TypeScript was also a nice addition to our tech stack, and allowed us to give us an automated way of adhering to a contract, and with all its automated ways of checking pretty much the types between functions or between modules, etc., and ensuring that we're using things accordingly. That was quite nice. Image optimization using the next image component. This was added to Next.js as of version 10. This was also a pretty good addition to Next.js. When we started, I think we started with version 9 on the initial POCs, and then we moved on to version 10. We were quite early on, but we didn't have a lot of changes to make. But another sort of positive aspect of the Next.js team and framework is that it tends to be the upgrade process between a major version to another tends to be quite seamless or less painful, let's say, than any other frameworks. If I can compare it to, say, Angular 1 to Angular 2, for example, it's a day and night difference. Preview content mode. This is very useful for our content editors to be able to write content in our CMS. We're using Contentful as a headless CMS. Write content and be able to preview the content before they publish it. So before the content goes live, they're able to preview it, and only once they're happy with it, they click publish, and that content makes it to the end user. Yes, lots of other optimizations out of the box, which is really nice to see. And our initial sort of work that we did, we made use of Vercel as our hosting platform. Although at the moment we're just using Vercel for our preview environment, so like our ephemeral preview, pull request level environments, and for our production we are deploying to AWS. There was a few sort of hurdles we had to overcome along the way, but generally it was okay. So serving at the moment to platform in AWS. Can we move on to the next one? Yeah. So the on the UI side, we had a few choices here as well. We're looking at Tailwind, we're looking at Material UI, we looked at other UI libraries, probably more well known than Chakra UI. And Chakra UI was a suggestion from one of our engineers, and initially we were a bit skeptical to Chakra. So what we did is we built 3 POCs in different UI libraries using, I think, Tailwind, Bootstrap, if I'm not mistaken, and Chakra. And to our surprise, Chakra actually performed way better than the other 2 on our page speed insights when we tested the POCs that we did. There were some simple PLP pages, product listing pages, with the product cards and some pagination and some lazy loading on rendering and such. So this was pretty good, and that was one of these sort of decisive factors that pushed us toward Chakra. But also, on the other hand, we were also one of our North Stars in deciding what UI library to use was the ability to have a toolkit that will empower our front-end engineers to build interfaces without writing any CSS. I mean, not that we don't believe in CSS. We think CSS is great. We just purely for sort of efficiency reasons and the ability to build things, adhering to our brand guidelines in a unified, consistent, and why not a fast way of building stuff. And Chakra was played quite nicely to our North Star, because there's a lot of great defaults, around 50 plus, I think, components, pre-built components out of the box, easily themable, built on top of star system and emotion. Yeah, I must say in the beginning there was a bit of learning curve, trying to adjust it for some of our engineers to move from a CSS world to a stock components way of thinking. But then once we, in a couple of weeks, I think we were all pretty happy with it. There is a few small sort of bits, maybe gotchas at times, but once you overcome them, it becomes quite nice and easy to work with. Accessibility comes by default with Chakra. All of its components, pre-built components, are they adhere to the WAI standard. I think it's the accessibility standard. And yeah, it also has a very good and collaborative community around it. It's a library that is being developed quite actively and growing every day. So yeah, these were some of the reasons why I chose Chakra. In terms of how to ensure quality when we develop, it's mainly to do with experimentation, collaboration, and trying to make data-driven decisions, so basing our decisions on facts rather than gut feelings. Whenever we are not sure about a tool or a framework, whatever it is, we always put it to a test. So always find an alternative, time box some time for some of us to test these out and then compare them. In terms of other activities or other ways of working, pair programming is very much welcomed and very much encouraged across the team. All our engineers pair program, especially on features that they believe contribute to knowledge sharing and avoid creating knowledge silos or knowledge islands. Peer review, so we peer review each other's work. In terms of testing, lots of testing. In unit level, integration level, we do our UI toolkit or the collection of our components, the building blocks of our interfaces. We have chromatic visual testing on each component using Storybook. And we also do functional and visual diff testing using Cypress. More functional than visual diff testing. Initially, we started with quite a bit of visual diff testing, but then we soon realized that there was quite a bit of variance in them, and especially when you run these visual diff tests on different systems and environments, you always get these peculiar rendering differences, which always cause drift and cause false positives. Functional testing, yes, but everything in Cypress. We've also lately been creating some Selenium WebDriver tests to run automated tests against physical devices in browser stack. It is quite nice as well, ensuring that we are offering the baseline of our mobile devices and we are operational on those devices. The performance testing, Lighthouse, we're looking to move from Lighthouse to web page test. Lighthouse has quite a sensible variance too. And load testing, K6 and artillery, static code analysis, SonarQube. Our CI/CD pipelines are built on using GitHub Actions, and our automation is all done on Terraform, and we currently deploy to AWS, most of our infrastructure. In terms of delivery, developers, on their own or pair, most of the time pairing. Work on our local machines. We push to our, so we open, once we have everything ready, we open a pull request in GitHub that triggers a series of events, and it results in some, as mentioned earlier, some preview. So the application is deployed in isolation in Vercel at the moment, and create these ephemeral preview environments where our UX and our business stakeholders can have a look and validate that the feature that was requested adheres to the requirements. Once we're happy on the business side as well as on the automation side, as you can see, we have lots of tests, like unit tests, end-to-end tests, static code analysis, browser stack, we have chromatic, UI review, and UI tests. Once everything is green and one or two of our peers has approved our pull request, the merge action of this pull request triggers a production deploy. So we are essentially can be considered like working close to the main trunk. Everything that gets merged to the main branch ends up in production in a matter of minutes. Yeah, so this is pretty much what we do, and it's worked quite well for us so far. Yeah. Hope I didn't miss anything, but if I did, please feel free to ask any questions. We're here. Some of the questions that we sort of prepared in advance, which we've encountered quite often, was why did you choose Next over Gatsby? Gatsby is a good tool. In the beginning, when we were looking to and trying to do the analysis and comparison between the two, we felt that Next was a bit more sort of, it allowed us to do a bit more purely on the ability and the hybrid nature that allows you to do, client side rendering, server side rendering, static side generation, and especially the incremental static regeneration, which is something that we think in the coming months is going to be a game changer especially on the rendering side, web applications. Gatsby, on the other hand, it's a bit more opinionated, especially with regards to how it does things. On the rendering side, it's purely statically generated. It can run without a server. It doesn't really need a server because it's basically just pure HTML and ready to render on screen. On the data side, not that it's not positive side. We like GraphQL and we use GraphQL. Gatsby forces you, especially when you the data, it forces you to use GraphQL and GraphQL conventions with regards to consuming data on the client side on the browser. Did we consider any other approaches beyond React.js? To be honest, no. In this case, we felt quite safe with React. Most of the team had previous experiences with all sorts of JavaScript frameworks, Angular being one of the other sort of contender, Vue.js as well. For React, sort of satisfied all our needs, and most of us were comfortable developing in React, and we like the logic of the composition logic of React, and we think that it's a nice way of thinking about web development in general, you know, creating that mental model that tree shapes dependency of components. Why choose Chakra over mainstream React alternatives? It was purely based on a suggestion from a colleague of ours, but it turned out to perform very good on our POCs and our testing and comparison that we did with Tailwind and I think pure. We also did pure style components, and Chakra performed better than them, which was a very surprising fact. And they also has helped us to build quite some very nice and consistent building blocks for our interfaces, which pretty much has satisfied all our needs, and we are very happy with it. And can you join Beautify? Yes, absolutely. We are 40 at the moment in the engineering team, and we are looking to grow even further. If I'm not mistaken, Carl, the objective is to double in maybe a year or so.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right.
That's all for me, and yeah, looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Redian. Really good.
Thanks, Redian. Carl, anything else to add from you, or should we open the floor up to in case anyone's got any questions?
I guess just one thing on that last slide that Redian presented. So I guess what we've been really conscious of is what I'd term like modern engineering is really, you know, the team's own both the commercial goals and outcomes we're trying to achieve as a business in terms of growth, but the team's own also quality. So you saw Redian walking through all the controls we have around continuous delivery, which means we don't have any QAs in our business at all, testers. Does that mean we're not serious around quality? Well, no, it's the team's own quality, and we built automation to allow us to build, test, deploy at pace. And so everything, as Redian said, will go through very short-lived pull requests, and it goes through the funnel very quickly, so we can always largely fix forward if we have issues. And also security as well. We don't really have security as a function either, and there's other functions that are more traditional. Again, security building into how we build software is a really important kind of behavior in the team. And we don't have a separate security function or a test function. Everything's done within the teams and how they own the outcome, the technology, the security, the quality. Again, it's a really important part of our culture and our DNA. So yeah, Jack, I think that was the only thing to add. So yeah, any questions we'd love to ask?
Definitely got a question from Jacob, if you want to speak up.
Yes, please. You said you went for the pre-generated static site option with Next.js, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I think you cited the reason for that being that it is like super fast for making the subsequent request to the CDN or what have you, where all these static assets are set.
Yeah, so it's a combination of things. So when we build let's say the PLP pages, when we build them at build time rather than runtime, we sort of defer the amount of work that the client has to do to sort of put everything in place with regards to the page, how it renders on screen. So the HTML page with the minimal amount of CSS and JavaScript and the optimized images is built in build time and cached on the CDN. So as soon as a client, a browser, requests that page, that page is ready to be served, as opposed to server-side rendering, where the first, in an ideal case scenario, the first client to request that page will have to take a hit on performance because the server needs to do quite a bit of work to fetch the data, fetch the markup, the templates, populate those templates with this data, bundle the JavaScript and CSS with it, and serve it down to the client. And maybe in the process of serving it down to the client, also caches it in the CDN for the subsequent requests. So this is the beauty of static site generation. It improves the process of preparing your cake and of offering it to your customer to consume it, rather than mashing up all the ingredients on request and cooking the cake and letting your customer to wait for it. You have it prepared and you just give it to them in their table.
How do you handle pages
if it's a good analogy, sorry.
Yes. How do you handle pages that are specific to a particular client? Let's say you have like, I don't know if this is a feature of your service, but like you've got a special promotion that's being applied, or something like that. Go ahead.
Oh, absolutely, great question. The static site generation is very useful for static pages, not dynamic pages, pages that need to be personalized to a user or pages that change often. Static site generation is probably not a good idea. There's a few alternatives where you can prepare a skeleton page and then populate that page with widgets on the fly. This helps quite a bit, but with regards to the pages that you're suggesting, generally personalization, when personalization kicks in, we use server-side rendering for that. And occasionally we also use client-side rendering.
Hi, sorry, yeah, I was going to ask about something, PWA, if you have found any challenges across operating systems in iOS and Android, and if you have, how have you dealt with them?
Yeah, PWAs are not fully supported in iOS. This was actually quite a big discussion in our team, where we should, given the fact that I think quite a good chunk of our user base are iOS devices, whether we should go with PWA or we should just consider creating mobile apps. But the benefits that we saw in terms of PWA is not just a manifest file. PWA is a little bit more than that, meaning you need to adhere to quite a few constraints that they sort of force you to, which are very good, actually, good best practices. And we chose to, even though it's not fully supported in Safari on iOS, we chose to go with it because of all the benefits that it has. And we sort of taking that, or we did that decision consciously rather than figuring it out further down the line. So in terms of challenges, yes. So the scoping, it was quite an interesting one, especially when you're trying to take over traffic from an existing platform in an incremental fashion. So let's say you want to take traffic page by page or maybe section by section on a website, rather than the whole thing in a big bang sort of release. This is a little bit tricky. You need to scope your PWA, otherwise your service workers and your web workers will try and cache everything that they see in your, everything that they notice your browser is all the requests that your browser is making upstream, whether it's your service serving them or whether it's the incumbent one. But it's once you get it working, it works pretty good.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
As an engineer, I would really like to see sites start moving to PWA and then just foregoing the iOS support and throw up a banner that says you're getting a bad experience because Apple decided that for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But weirdly enough, although they say that they don't support it, majority of the features is actually there. They want the main bit that they're pushing against. I think it's push notifications and some other APIs, if I'm not mistaken, geolocation or something. And they basically hide it as much as they can. The ability for you to add it to home screen so that your web page essentially operates similar to the mobile app in the iOS system. But other than that, I think quite a few of the APIs and functionalities is actually supported.
Yeah, they know that they've got like a stranglehold if they keep the push notifications from PWA. So they're just citing performance concerns that no one else had problems with. But
on that
James
note,
had a similar question.
Yeah, there's a note in the chat, maybe more for you, Carl, or either or. But
yeah, James, I can answer it. So I think, I mean, this, like I said, was probably one of the hardest decisions in all this early iteration beyond the technology, because you're right, is like, should we go with a mobile app which is very well embedded within consumers, and why did we go with something which wasn't? And it's really based on where we are, maybe as a stage of a business as well, as in we're very much in a acquisition phase of growth, not necessarily in a retention phase. And in acquisition, it's really, well, our North Star was removing friction from a consumer, somebody who's never been to us before, and never sometimes even heard of Beauty Pie. There's a lot of hurdles we have to get over. One is obviously the brand and brand recognition and brand affinity. They're going to put this stuff on the skin, so there's a lot of trust that they're going to have to build with the consumer to even get to add to bag and check out. And then we also add another hurdle, which is our business model, which is a membership-based model. And so to buy, you have to be a member. Yeah? And so there's a hurdle at the end at the basket saying, to buy, you've got to join for £5 a month, whatever it is. And so we felt another level of friction, as in, before you can even start to shop, you've got to go to the App Store, you've got to find us, you've got to download us to your phone, you've got to maybe sometimes free space on your phone, because people, often have hundreds of apps on the phone and sometimes find them hard to find as well. We felt that was a lot of friction when we're in this acquisition phase of the business. So we went more with, okay, well, let's keep it simple for a consumer to remove as much friction as we can in the shopping element of hey, I found a product I like, add it to bag and check out. And that's really what drove our decisions initially. But I think those will change over time when we become more of a balanced acquisition and retention business, where I think retention is apps are a really, really important, strong retention kind of lever as well. You don't want to have to keep going to your browser, find Beauty Pie and things like that. You want to just go to your app and have a digital relationship with the consumer through an app as well. And I think there'll be a point at which we'll probably need and want one of those as well. And that will kind of go alongside our progressive experience, but probably next year, I suspect, but we'll see.
Great, thank you. It's been a bit of a battle over web and app, as you've probably had yourself. So yeah, it's been great. Thank you.
And I think we mentioned before, as in, I think the hard decision for us was, if you look at we are in a luxury brand within a luxury segment. And so if you look at the number of consumers who shop, a significant proportion of them shop on Apple devices as well. And then that's kind of a correlation between the segment we're in this luxury segment. And so that was a big consideration. And we did a lot of analysis and understanding around, what considerations by going progressive would that mean we couldn't do in the future, and that really, and so there wasn't that many actually, and so that made the decision a lot simpler and easier. But again, I think at some point we probably will need a progressive app.
You
We have another question from Ishan. Sorry, Peter. We have another question from Ishan in the chat. Ishan is asking about our deployments, saying that what I mentioned earlier, that as soon as one of our PRs is merged to main, that goes straight to production. And he says that this requires heavily reliance on automation testing. How do you ensure that most of the coverage tools can be pulled into delivering 100% coverage? Right. So yes, that's correct. We don't aim for 100% coverage. That's why we are employing or making use of a suite of testing tools and practices. So we use unit testing, we use functional testing, visual diff testing. Our components are fully tested. The TypeScript, on the other hand, also ensures that we are adhering to our method signatures and the contracts of communication between components. On top of that, the static generation has actually proven quite beneficial on this regard as well, because what we do is in our build process, we go and fetch all the data we need to render a page accordingly. And if anything, or if, let's say, the data or the shape of the data doesn't match up what we need, or the layouts that we need, our build process breaks. So pretty much our deploy fails and nothing goes to production. So yes, we do a lot of testing, automated testing quite a lot, and the building and the bundling jobs that we do, and pretty much ensure that pages that will be rendered to are going to be powerful pages rather than partially populated pages. Otherwise, everything will break. So this has worked quite for us in the last nine months. We've had only like one outage, and this was mainly because of a runtime error of maybe a bit of a human error as well. But generally, is what very good, I'd say.
I think just to add to that as well,
we don't aim for 100% coverage.
And really, we aren't perfect. Again, like so, what we built is speed of delivery is an important part of small incremental changes into the production environment to reduce the risk of impact, because everything's very small. And then if there is any unforeseen impact, and we will know that quite quickly in the production environment with all our monitoring alerting tools. I think Reading didn't cover those, but we've got any post-deployment things that we make sure in a production environment, we know if there's a problem before our customers on the whole, and 99 times out of 100 we will, and then we can fix it really quickly in the production environment because we've got the infrastructure to move very quick. So typically we may deploy 10, 15, 50 times a day because the tools are there to allow us to do that. And so not only the deployment process and the testing up to production, but it's post go live or deploying production, we'll know, we'll see, we'll alert 24/7, and we'll be able to fix it going forward on the whole.
And our automation testing has a very high focus on our critical path. Meaning, well, even if something small breaks, we'll still be operational and people will be able to check out and buy stuff.
Thank you for that. Yes, you did. Just a few follow-up questions on that. First one, how much time does your build pipeline take? You did mention lots of testings that you do. So which would mean the build time would increase considerably, right? The second question that I have is, right, even if your tests are passing, how do you ensure that you have good enough coverage? For example, someone could make a change which might not break things, but it might not be tested as well. So how do you ensure that in your system?
On the first one, When we started, the pipelines were very fast. And as you can imagine, as things grow, as the platform grows, they can get slow. We've worked quite closely with our DevOps team to make use as much as possible of Docker layer caches, and lately, as of actually today, we're also using the GitHub Actions cache API, which has reduced our build time from, I think, just the dependency testing, type checking, and linting job that we had was taking about anything from 8 to 12 minutes, and it reduced only that step, right? In our pipeline, deployment pipeline, we reduced that to 4 seconds. Once the cache layers were in place, any subsequent deploy was reduced from about 8 to 12 minutes to about 4 seconds. On a whole, as a deployment pipeline at the moment, all the operations, given that the package JSON file hasn't changed, it will take about 4 to 5 minutes, the whole pipeline. So it's relatively quick, I would say.
Yeah, thank you.
Part of our culture as well is, there's a balance between engineering investment and commercial delivery to achieve like commercial goals, and we try and balance the two. So we're coming to quite a big release in the next week or so. And then we're effectively going to stop the line actually and start to invest in some parts of our production line where we've seen we haven't got the right level of maturity, whether it's speed or coverage. The coverage is a bit of a hard one to articulate, but do we have the right controls in place? And controls being from quality, security, performance, all those kind of things. And we'll stop again and invest for maybe 1 or 2 weeks in making sure that we always have the engineering investment alongside the kind of commercial product investment. And it's really important that we balance the two together. It's hard to do that when you're running to a commercial goal. You've seen business saying you have this kind of 80-20 or whatever. How do we do that within the team? But on the whole, my experience, that's hard to do across teams.
I just realized I missed Isham's second question, which was about the how do you ensure that a feature change for someone is actually tested. Isham, it's a collaborative effort. We all sort of try and keep each other in check, especially during our peer review phases. Whenever a critical or a feature that is substantial or important to the well-being of the platform is introduced, we always encourage each other to add tests for it, whether it's unit tests, integration tests, or functional tests, or combination of them. So we always try and get these tests in, and the main reason for it is what Carl mentioned earlier. We don't have QAs, and none of us wants to be woken up by PagerDuty on a weekend to at 3 a.m. in the morning to try and fix a site, our website. We're gonna make sure that everything is functional before we go on our weekend.
That's very true. To be honest, I was expecting that, because we were facing a similar problem in our team as well, and we couldn't find any automated way, like fully automated way of checking what's the actual code coverage. Thank you.
Yeah, always try and diversify. So try and use a combination of different tools and frameworks to achieve a better outcome. You can't just rely on unit testing or functional testing or integration testing alone. Always a combination. It seems, for us at least, that worked pretty good.
Thank you, Radiant. I think that's
sometimes small things. It
looks like we're I think that's covered it from everyone, and some nice comments on the side as well. So I think we can we can wrap up. But thanks very much for your time, everyone. Thanks for attending, and massive thanks to Carl and Radiant, obviously, for sharing the story tonight. really interesting. Thank you very much. Virtual round of applause from anyone that's still here. Appreciate it. And we'll save the recording and share it with everyone as well at a later date.
Perfect.
Thanks
everyone. Yeah, have a good evening.
Thanks all. Have a good evening. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers, guys.